1929, a severe worldwide economic depression began. It shaped and affected the lives of many Canadians and made its permanent mark on history. What has changed? What has stayed the same? It all started with the Roaring Twenties, a time of luxury, leisure, and economic prosperity. Everyone was buying, taking loans, the stocks were all the rage. People were excited at the prospect of making more money by buying shares, and all was fine and dandy until Black Tuesday. Thus began the period of time known as the Great Depression, a time of poverty, shame, and hopelessness. Let's take a look at 4 aspects of life in the 1930s, starting with unemployment. But the question we're going to be looking at is, what did the government do to deal with unemployment? In 1932, as a possible solution to the outrage of the people and the rising unemployment, Prime Minister Bennett introduced relief camps. These camps included measly pay, hard manual labor, and horrible living conditions. Prime Minister Bennett's plan to deal with unemployment was not a success. It resulted in a riot and the camps eventually closing down. Flash forward to the year 1968. Unemployment insurance was introduced in 1940 and has continued to grow and improve in the last few decades. The government had taken a firm role in dealing with unemployment and developed the Department of Manpower and Immigration, which handled the employment service. By the end of the 60s, the unemployment insurance covered 68% of the workforce. 37 more years brought what is now known as the employment insurance system many more advances. There were major institutional changes made to the system in 1971 when the Unemployment Insurance Act was implemented. This new act provided adequate income support for all people experiencing employment interruptions. The system now provided nearly universal coverage for paid employees. It made eligibility easier and added benefits such as sickness, maternity, and retirement. We learned that the government's involvement has stayed constant. However, the government's role in unemployment has gotten bigger. We can see that the government has been better prepared and better planned for unemployment, which has positively impacted Canadians. Canadians have a better chance of recovering from unemployment and finding employment once again. During one of the most difficult times of their lives, people often turn to entertainment. During the 1930s, movies were a way for millions of people to get away from their troubles. And now that the talkies were here, escape from reality got a whole lot more interesting. Movie tickets were also relatively cheap, making it a perfect form of entertainment for everyone. Stars such as Fred Astaire, Katharine Hepburn, and Clark Gable stole the hearts of many. Movies such as Frankenstein, King Kong, Gone with the Wind, and Wizard of Oz are still well known today. Almost 40 years passed, and the role of movies in people's lives did not diminish. Movies had a powerful effect on people, with the combined impact of images, music, lighting, sound. It created deep feelings and helped many people reflect on their lives. Movies had developed a lot since the 1930s and were now commonly in color and had numerous special effects. Famous movies of the 70s included The Godfather, Jaws, Star Wars, Rocky, and Grease. Another 40 years later, the movie industry is thriving. Movies are still used as a source of entertainment and have a massive influence on society. They shape cultural attitudes, challenge morals, and transform opinions. Many movies have been released this decade that show us how far the movie industry has come in terms of special effects and movie quality. We can see that movies as a form of entertainment have stayed constant. However, movies have advanced in forms of technology and visual effects. This change has been positive for everybody because better technology results in higher quality films that reflect society and teach us about ourselves. The 1920s included a lot of progressions and advancements for women, but what was life like in the 1930s? The 30s began with a bang for women, as Kyrene Wilson was appointed the first female senator of Canada. The 1930s also had a demand for employment equality. The Canadian Federation of Business and Professional Women's Club emerged in 1930. However, the Great Depression reversed the positive employment trend of the 20s, and in the 1930s many women were forced back into domestic service. Even a long-time employer of women, the garment industry, were laying off women at a higher rate than men. 30 years later, the fight for employment equality was still going strong. Men were seen as more likely to work in unionized occupations, while women remained locked into female occupations such as those clerical. In 1961, earnings of full-time employed women were 59% of the earnings of men in the same category. The federal government responded by creating new procedures to deal with women's rights, and a Royal Commission on the Status of Women in Canada was established in 1967. By the end of the decade, the women's movement voiced protest in the form of women's centers and consciousness-raising groups. Over the next 30 years, many milestones were made for women, such as in 1978, the Canadian Human Rights Act came into effect, and that prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex. Another milestone was the introduction of the Pay Equity Act in 1987. Women made advances in higher-paying professional occupations such as dentists and doctors. However, though the wage gap had decreased, it still existed. We can see that the wage gap and the perseverance of women is constant, but the women's movement continues to grow stronger and grow closer towards equality. This change is positive because it brings us closer to a world where no one is discriminated against. During the Great Depression, people also turned to music to cope, and because of the inexpensive radios of the 1920s, music was accessible to everyone. During the 30s, music genres such as jazz, swing, and blues were very popular. Songs such as Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Judy Garland, Pennies from Heaven by Frank Sinatra, and Big Rock Candy Mountain by Burl Ives were a form of entertainment, but most importantly, they were also a form of distraction from their sufferings. Other songs, such as Brother, Can You Spare a Dime by Al Jolson, reflected the anger felt by the people as well as their sense of shame. Music during the Great Depression reflected their sorrows and also posed as a distraction. During the 1970s, genres such as soul, R&B, pop, rock, and hip-hop became more popular. Songs such as Dancing Queen by ABBA, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, and Stayin' Alive by Bees Gees were popular songs that entertained and created joy in all its listeners. Songs such as What's Going On by Marvin Gaye also spread meaningful messages about society's problems such as racial prejudice and war. Popular music genres of the 2010s included pop, hip-hop, rock, and electronic music. Music is used as a form of entertainment and is seen as a vital part of life for many people. Music is also used to create strong, powerful messages about the problems that plague society. One example is Childish Gambino's This Is America, a song that displays the harsh reality of gun violence and racism. We can see that movies that reflect society and entertain have been constant. Music genre, styling, and production has changed to reflect pop culture and interests of the people. The change positively affects listeners because it develops more relatability to the music. Relatable music makes the message more impactful. Canada grew from its past, and the continuity and change of the events of the 1930s made Canada the way it is today.